Welcome to Harmonium LA, the podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Heedy Gandolfi, emotional wellness expert, founder of Harmonium LA, and published author. The world needs healing now more than ever. My goal is to bring you inspiring conversations, tips, and techniques that will help you build a sustainable healing toolkit. The Harmonium LA podcast is the only resource you will need to slow down, stop searching, and start healing. Welcome to today's show, another episode of Stop Searching and Start Healing. So our guest today is joining us from right down the street here in Venice in California, originally from London. And she is here really to share with us today a journey that she has been on over the last couple of years, following a really in-depth healing journey after a real tragic loss in her life. And so she's really here to share her story, her mindset, and how she's really managed to turn that tragedy and that loss into a platform for creating conscious healing across the globe. So let me give you a bit of background about her, and then we will bring her in and let her do the talking. Holly Gottlieb, having followed the traditional circuit of good school, university, and then professional life in London, had the opportunity to move out to Los Angeles in her mid-20s to help set up the US arm of her London headhunting firm. 3 years of living the Venice lifestyle and helping recruit and build community around the hyper-growth Silicon Beach tech scene came to an abrupt end in 2019 when her business partner, Tom, who had been suffering with anxiety and panic attacks, walked into the Santa Monica Ocean and drowned. This spiraled Holly into a deep journey of self-discovery and healing, which has spanned the last 2 years. She started channeling energy and receiving messages that were so far beyond everything she had learned up until that point. Experiencing a dark night of the soul led Holly to meditation, and as a 30th birthday gift to herself in February 2020, she decided to gift a year of intentional healing to herself, understanding that unless she learned the inner workings of her own mind, the ego would always keep her prisoner. In the summer of 2020, she gave away all her possessions, ended the lease on a beautiful Venice apartment, and embraced the Nomad life, getting on the road with her guitars and heading straight into the unknown. In the last 9 months, she has traveled across the US and had more mind-blowing experiences than the rest of the other 30 years combined. She has been writing and performing music throughout it all and channeling messages from source to the collective. Having taken a hiatus on life for 18 months, Holly has recently returned to Venice with the intention of putting all of her experience to good use. She is now bringing together in person both the people and businesses who are paving the way for the integration of higher consciousness into our physical experience. She's a musician, energy healer, and community builder, with all aspects of this centering around how we find connection with ourselves, each other, and Gaia. So, without any further ado, please join me in welcoming Holly to today's show. Holly, welcome to the show. It's such an honor to have you here and joining us today to talk to the audience and the community just about your journey, your, literally everything, your inspiration, where you've been, where you are now, and just the healing that you've been through as a result of everything over the last 5 years. We're so thrilled to have you. So welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Hello.
It's so beautiful how it works. I mean, we were introduced through actually a previous guest of mine who I met through a mastermind that I was in. And again, she just connected. She's like, you have to speak to this girl. She's phenomenal. And so we had this conversation and she was right. I mean, you are absolutely phenomenal. Your story was so impactful to me when you told me about your journey and what you'd been through. It resonated on so many levels. And just to see where you have come from to where you are now and the healing process that you went on and what you're now doing to help other people was just so inspiring that we just have to share it. We just do.
I'm here for it. Hi.
So welcome. So talk to us. Tell us a little bit. I mean, obviously I did the intro and you've had quite the amazing career. So
I feel like it's one of those things that up until the last couple of years, I felt like I was always in the right place at the right time. So I came out to, so I did what felt like a very normal life, went to good school, good uni, ended up in London as a recruitment consultant, which wasn't thrilled about, did the whole, party hard, thing in London for a few years. And then something at the time, so I was 26, it wasn't feeling right. So I quit that job. And next thing you know, I got the opportunity to, instead of leaving the company, move out with the company to LA, with my business partner, Tom, who a big part in this story. But yeah, we moved out to Venice in Los Angeles, and I thought LA was going to be all fast cars, and I thought I'd hate it. And it was one of those things that was like landed in my lap of, hey, go to LA. I was like, all right. And loved it, fell in love with LA. Obviously you live here and it's beautiful. You can't really describe that lifestyle until you're in it. And it's magical in many ways. Did the corporate life, when socializing, met people, did all the things I was supposed to do, built a business, a recruitment business. So that involved kind of networking with all the startup CEOs, investors, and all that stuff in LA. Until Tom, who it always took me a while to understand my dynamic with him. He's actually why I got the job in London. But I basically spent nearly 6 years every day with him, working with him. I was kind of his Robin. He was the Batman, going and doing like the big sales stuff, and I was his sidekick. But in kind of when I was a young sproggin in London. But we moved out here together. He's my best friend, and he was suffering with anxiety and depression. And in May of 2019, he walked into Santa Monica Ocean and drowned. And that was the catalyst for everything. So that's been kind of nearly 2 years. And it's funny because I have no issue talking about all that stuff, but it catapulted me into a deep journey of self-discovery and healing. And I basically had no choice. Kind of the following 6 months, I was taken to my knees, kind of had a huge spiritual awakening as a result, kind of got ripped open by the pain, as people would talk about. But I had no choice but to look at and start understanding who I was, start healing all the emotional, physical, spiritual things that I had gone through. And it was so new to me. Up until that point, I was, hi, I'm Holly, I'm English, I'm just working. This whole world was just so foreign to me up until 2 years ago. And so it's been a couple of years of being fast track healing and looking at everything and diving head into it.
But I think that so many people, no doubt listening, can probably relate to that, because sometimes it takes something as traumatic as that was, you were living the life, like you had this incredible lifestyle. Like you say, you'd gone through the process in London, having this amazing life. You had the opportunity to move here with your best friend, building a new life, new career, doing all of the things. And then to have that ripped out, and to have your heart ripped out one day like that, and just not, I'm sure that you probably felt, did you feel like you could have done more? Did you feel that was part of?
Yeah, so there were so many, this was a key part in my experience, or I suppose connection with the divine. I was experiencing things around this time that I couldn't explain, that I never associated or understood faith or religion or spirit or God in any sense before this. But I now call myself a person of faith. And with Tom specifically, I had a dream about it a couple of weeks before. We were very, very close, and he actually left the business and took a role as the MD for the US for Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which is a bougie travel brand, which in English kind of they were building out here. And he got the gig, and so we had this 6 months where we actually broke up in October when he left the business, and we had this really traumatic thing, and I couldn't stop crying for 3 days, and I didn't understand why couldn't I stop crying. Tom's just going to a job down the road. I'm going to see him all the time.
You'd been together 24/7, like you say.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that huge connection. Then all of a sudden he's gone to do his own thing, and you're like, oh, hold on.
Yeah, I mean, he was everything to me. It was the most attachment that you can to have to a person. And so I guess on a soul level, I knew it was kind of a pre-separation. And I actually have voice notes from that time when we had this like really intense emotional charge breakup, basically, which I realized weren't for then, was actually for kind of six months further down the line. But that period of time, I saw him, and he was he was going through it. He was really going through it. And I had a dream about, you know, him doing this, but it was kind of symbolic, and, you know, afterwards it made a lot of sense. And I actually saw him a couple of days before the couple of days before it happened. I went on a big road trip. I was starting to experience life. Magical synchronicities were happening. I was like, oh my God, I felt so in the right place at the right time. I went on a 2-week road trip around Arizona, and just I had this time. I was like, going to go climb some mountains and do this thing. And when I got back to LA on the Sunday, I knew I had to see Tom. Something was just in me. We kind of were drifting. I kind of didn't hear from him as much, and I understand kind of the process of what was going on. And he was going through his dark night of the soul. I believe he was experiencing things that he didn't understand, right, and didn't have the people in his life, or the resources, or the information to understand that he wasn't losing his mind. As you know, when we go through this dark place spiritually, emotionally, we're like, what the hell is going on? But I got back to LA on the Sunday, and I knew I had to see him. And on the Monday, I went round, and he was outside his house, and he just gave me the biggest hug, and he said, "I'm not okay, Holes." And I said, "I know." And I had no understanding about soul connection at this point. I was just like, he's my best friend. We went for a long drive at the PCH, and we spoke about all kind of soul and mind, and we were so interested in the mind. And he never really got to the soul, to the right, divine aspect. It was always like mind and purpose and drive. And we just, we had a great chat, and Sunset Drive, and it was perfect. It couldn't be a better goodbye. And then when I dropped him off, I said, TV, Tom, it's I think you need to learn how to love yourself more. I think this is what it's all about. He said, "You're right." And we had a good hug, and I just knew, oh wait, I'm on this planet to get Tom through this no matter what. Like that is why I'm here in this human body, is to get Tom through this. And it could take weeks, it could take months, but this is why I'm here. And that was kind of one of the first times I just like knew, oh, this is why I'm here. And I spoke to him on the Wednesday. We were going to do yoga, and ended up not, but something wasn't quite right. And then on Thursday morning, I got the call. And then it was just, I happened to be 1 block from the hospital when I got the call. I was in yoga when it actually happened, and started feeling, I felt really sick in my body during that yoga class, but I couldn't make sense of it and understand now. And, that obviously so much going on, you're experiencing so many emotions. And so that feeling of, wait, this was my job. This is why I was here. I was here to get Tom through this. And then, wait, this can't be right. And a lot of it is a whirlwind, and a lot of it, but it's, so that feeling of what could I have done, I realized, oh wait, Tom gave me that gift of life. This is what I can do. I feel like what he's going through is what so many people are going through, which is trauma, anxiety, experiencing life in a way which we're not meant to be doing. We're meant to be living in purpose and healing ourselves. And I found myself in a similar spot as him, kind of 6 months after that. It took me to the breaking point. Yeah. And whereas he went one way, I chose to start the healing journey. And for whatever reason, that's the path I went down. And here we are having a conversation about it kind of nearly a year and 14 months later. And I now understand that everything happened in the most perfect way for me able to share that experience, understand what happened with him, understand the tools that we've discussed, and all around the healing and in all capacities. So I know that I'm going off on a big tangent here.
No, relative.
And it's understand the power of that, because it was quite literally a case of pulling myself out of that. No one else could have done that. I had to do that myself. And
you had that choice, and it's as hard as it was, Tom, the choice he made was that choice, and it's tragic as it was for you now to you had that choice too, like, which way do I go? This is the worst thing that could possibly have happened, and I can't believe that this has happened to my best friend, and I couldn't stop it. You did what you could, and that was the path that he chose to take for whichever reason, but you then had that choice where you could go one way or the other, and you chose the healing route and trying to deal with that trauma and that I can't even imagine the darkness that came alongside of that.
Mm.
To be able to turn it around, because you know in your heart that there are so many other people dealing with and struggling with what Tom went through, that now it's almost your purpose and your mission to help those other people. But you had to heal yourself first. I mean, talk to us about how you did that.
So I guess, it started, so I'll be very honest about everything. I found myself in California, which is a very foreign thing to well, I started smoking weed here. I wasn't a drinker, but it's marketed like, oh, you go and smoke weed, and it's like you just buy it like you're in a candy store, and it's very normal. Everyone here and their grandma smokes. But I found myself that became a coping mechanism to cope with the pain. Alongside that, I started tapping into psychedelics, and I had substances very readily available to me, which not only did they take the pain away, but when I was using, I was also experiencing energy. I was sitting in my garden in my one bed in Venice, looking at this tree, and I started understanding things, and I would start speaking to source, and I would start knowing things. So I had something which not only, as I say, took away the pain, but also it felt like a power drug. But it then became a habit, and I was using it as a crutch to cope. So that was kind of a 6 months experiencing all this pain, and it felt like life was suddenly accelerating. I was having all these experiences, and if anyone's used medicine of that sort to have journeys and experience another world, it's very real. I'm sitting in the garden, I suddenly have a hummingbird that hovers a foot from my face, and I'm talking to it, and I know this, and I'm very comfortable talking about how crazy this stuff is, because you start having experiences and talking to nature and things that you can't explain beyond the rational mind. You just can't unless you've experienced it. You're like, oh, I knew that was, you knew it was Tom, like coming to say hi, or not even him, but just things. But it got to that point where I thought I'd lost my mind in January, 2020, and I realized that I became aware of the fact that I was using drugs as a way to cope, and it wasn't something that I was aware of before. And it was around the same time that I found a book called Untethered Soul by Mickey Singer, which is actually a book that Tom gave me. And I read it, and I remember him giving it to me saying, "You'd love this book," and I was like, all right. And I found it on my bedside table on the exact day that I needed to read it, and I did.
Of course.
And it started talking about the mind and getting still, and oh wait, your mind has thoughts. And I was like, wait, your mind has a thought? And through that, started getting still, introduced me to meditation. So I knew that I had to stop. I just cut off the drugs. I was like, oh my God, I had to stop.
Yeah.
Around the same time, kind of found that book, started understanding there was a mind in there, there were thoughts. So I just started that process of building my life. And that involved, there was some other things that I was listening to at the time that just made me get so still. And I realized, oh wait, I have to get a grip on this. There's a thought, there's a spinning machine in there that's just going to keep going around, and that's the trick. And it then became a process of meditating and just sitting and getting quiet every day, as many times as I could, and being so intentional about my thoughts. And around the same time, I also knew that I couldn't go back to that job. My soul was calling no, and I had to face up losing my income and getting kicked out of the US because my visa was tied to it, facing all these fears. And I was just like, every fear, because I wanted to stay in the US, it was my home, but I couldn't go back to this company. And all of it came to a head, and I was just at breaking point. And as I say, meditation, just getting still, and then finding some peace in there, like a flicker of, oh wait, that feels good in there. It became a way of starting to become aware of my thoughts, realizing that I had thoughts, then starting to realize what those thoughts were, and it was all like self-limiting, bad talk about myself. And it just became a process of addressing all of my thoughts and patterns and behaviors. But it really started from that. I think that is the biggest point when people ask me, how do you start that process? It's like the critical point is getting to the realization that you have thoughts. Yeah. And then you start understanding what those are. And I guess that was the starting point. And then a lot of experiences and understanding, energetic realms. But in terms of that healing journey, it started there really.
And I think a lot of people can relate to that, because I think like the process, the steps almost that you went through, the first one to be the numbing, smoking the weed, and then moving on to the psychedelics, you know, because that was the only coping tool that you could relate to at that point. And sometimes that's where you have to start somewhere, and if that's the entry point into it. But knowing that you had that awareness, something inside that you chose to listen to, because again, some people might not listen to that. They might have an inkling but not trust themselves enough to know that this is something that they should listen to, but you did. And then that just led to the next step, which became the meditation, to being still and knowing and listening to your mind, because that's where it all starts. You know, it's all in the mind, all these thoughts and whatever, like you say, the negative thought patterns and the things that we're telling ourselves, you know, but what can we do to change that? And there is always a breaking point, but it's whether we choose to hear that and then act on that. And that, I think, is the pivotal point for everybody. But it's when you're ready to do so, I think, too.
Yeah. And it's funny because, I mean, you know, the Buddhist philosophy around, you know, you can't take someone's dharma away from them. And you know, I'm grateful for having had a breaking point. And I know people that are looking for that breaking point, and essentially you do need to be on your knees. And later on I got into a 12-step program, and, you know, looking at kind of addictions, and actually that addiction in all, it's not just substance, but actually realizing it's my thoughts that were addictive. You realize that, you know, the people in these rooms, as they call it, they've had those breaking points where you actually, to ask for help, to suddenly make that choice is the most divine act that you can do, to realize that you are not, and I remember the critical point being around that time that I didn't know how I was going to get through. I remember being on all fours on the PCH. I'd gone for a drive, and then I was just like heaving sobs on like a road up on random Malibu somewhere. And I didn't know how I was going to get through it. I honestly, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this moment. And I turned it over. I turned it over to something else, and something got me through it. And that's kind of where the origin of my faith started. I was like, something got me through this. And it wasn't me, because I was completely broken. And I was broken. And you know, I think people are looking for, I find so many people that I've spoken to are looking for that change, but suffering is a great catalyst for that. I feel lucky to have had that pain, quite simply.
And that's the shift in mindset right there as well, is that you can look at it and say, oh my gosh, why me? That was so, you know, horrific and so painful and everything else. Why me? But alternatively, you can also turn it around and say, well, I have to be grateful for that, because that was the point at which everything turned and everything shifted, because I knew it had to. Something, you know, you have to get to breaking point before you can sometimes start to move forward. And as painful as it is, and for some people it might be a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and for others it may be years before they get to that point, but just trusting that something better has to come out of it, because it can't get any worse.
That was exactly it, actually. That was when I was figuring out how, sorry, my fridge has just come on, so I don't know if there's background noise, but you know, the numbers on the oven are telling me something. So I see this,
Tom just chatting
I see
away
it everywhere. He's just like, oh, you guys would get on so well. But I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about? But made you lost your train of thought as well.
About how, you have to get to that breaking point, and you have to accept that it's time, for change.
Yeah, and it's funny because, you know, lots of people, I've had people ask me kind of how do you get there? And I'm like, get your best friend to commit suicide, and you're on your road. But it comes down to choice. And I think piece by piece, I had to, I remember what my thought point, I'll come back to this. There's a loop here, and this isn't very cohesive, and I'm sorry for kind of going off on a tangent. But when I was at my, when I was facing losing my job, getting kicked out of the country, losing everything that I loved, and I felt like everyone that I knew, just I pushed everyone away. I kind of detached from every aspect of life that I knew it. And when I kind of started facing these fears, the question that I asked myself is, well, what's the worst that could happen? You know, I've already lost people that I love. You know, I've lost, you know, if I get kicked out of the country and lose my job, and I didn't want to do this job and lose my income, what's the worst that could happen? Okay, I go home to my parents in the UK and I figure it out. And I started I kept asking myself that question again and again. Okay, what's the worst that could happen? Yeah. And I had couches and friends that I knew that. And it just, that question became a lot easier to ask. And, you know, I find we're so paralyzed in fear of the unknown. So we never want to quit the job. We don't do the thing. We don't break up with that person, whatever the thing is, because what's the worst that could happen? But what I found is that every time I did something scary, this is kind of the last like year and a half, I've developed my GPS, which is something scary comes up, something I don't want to do, something that makes me uncomfortable. That is the direction I head now, because I know, and this is me living in faith, I guess, is every time I've done that, every time I felt guided to do something or share something or whatever, it's liberated me from something I was carrying. So all this trauma, all the mental, all the stuff that I was carrying, it just freed me from it. And actually, the byproduct of all this stuff of pain, I started loving my body for the first time. I was like, damn. I started like, and up until this point, I was 30, and I was like, I'd never really loved. I'd had all the body image, self-worth stuff that we all carry, and it was like oh wait, I didn't realize I could really love myself this much.
Do you think a lot of that as well is the fact that, you know, you realize, you know, how precious life is and how it can be taken in a second. And so at that point, you have to start thinking differently about it, because you start to realize that we only have this one life. We have to make the most of it. And really, you know, what's the worst that can happen? And all the resistance that shows up and all the fear, I agree with you 100%. And I think it's the challenge, and that's the path that you're supposed to be on. And it's how much do you want this? How much are you prepared to work through this? Because when you do that and you show up and you have faith and trust, what's on the other side of that is always so much more beautiful, but you just don't necessarily see it at the time. But just the acceptance of yourself, your own being in your own skin, in your own body on this planet, knowing that actually, so what's the worst that can happen? I have to go home and live with my parents. Okay, is that the worst thing, really?
I haven't seen them in a couple of years. It'd be great to see them.
It would be quite nice.
I'm not sure if I'd last long, but yeah, what's the worst that can happen? And it starts to become, there's so much that's paralyzing all of us. All the times I hadn't told people I liked them, and like all the stuff that was just so silly, and everything just got put in perspective. And we and then realizing how much, especially as women, and also I think men have a different, it's really actually cool understanding it from Tom's perspective, because I understand the societal pressures as a man, as a 34-year-old, gorgeous, attractive, world at his feet man, to have the expectations of society, and then the society expectations of women. And so we are both suffering in our own ways, and we're carrying so much weight, and we don't even realize it, and it's all put on us by other people. And I started to get to this point that I didn't spend a second speaking to anyone I didn't want to speak to. I wasn't doing, I just totally reclaimed everything back. This is me. All I'm doing is following what feels good in this moment. And I kind of had people understood, maybe not on those terms, that they thought maybe I didn't want to speak to them because I was, you know, going through it. But you start claiming back everything.
Come back to self, and the only way you can come back to self is to be with yourself, and to be in your own thoughts, and to be in your own space. And that's what you did. You took off right across the country. You just got your guitar, and that's off you went.
So I had a period of time, actually 6 months. So that kind of breaking point was in January 2020, and then I was very insular for a couple of months up until COVID hit. And then first month of COVID, then I also had an emergency hernia surgery, which when it was 2 weeks into COVID starting, and I was like, a dear friend from San Francisco literally drove down and saved my life, because I mean, again, that's a very scary experience when my family couldn't come into the country and lost a lot of people. And I kind of had some friends that kind of ditched me because I realized it had to serve a lesson in some way. But at the time it felt like I was being abandoned. But yeah, and then I had 6 months and I started playing music. So one of the things with Tom is that I played him a song about a month before he passed. He came over to my house, and I played guitar and I sung for myself, never for anyone else. And I played him this song called Masterpiece by Big Thief, which I'll send a link to that because I love the version.
Oh yeah, definitely. We'll put it in the show notes, definitely.
And I played him this song, and he was kind of really suffering at the time. We went for lunch. I said, just come round to my house, and he did. And I tucked him up under a blanket in my deck, and went and had a shower. And he had a snooze. And when he came back, I said, can I play you something? And I was covering this song, Big Thief by Masterpiece at the time. Masterpiece by Big Thief. And I played it in the garden, and I was so nervous. I was like, my voice is shaking. I was like, oh my God, I'm playing for someone. It's my best friend.
It's your best friend.
And he said, Holes, you have to do this. And I was like, I know TV, this is what I'm going to do. And the lyrics to that song, which weren't resonant, but didn't resonate at the time, were all about this best friend who was asking someone to help. And the lyrics in the last verse of, I won't give you to the tide, you'll always walk with me in my stride. Like, the lyrics of it are you kidding me? It is, I couldn't even get, like, when I realized what the lyrics were. So when he died, I was like, oh, I knew I had to sing that at his memorial. So we did a memorial for him in Venice at a friend's house 3 months after he died in August. And thank God for that, because I can't swear. I'm sorry if I've sweared so far. I was about to say scared, but of playing, you know, I was going through all this trauma, but I was like, I have to perform in front of 100 people. And so that kind of got me through it. And so I played at this memorial, sung this song, which was very emotional and very, like, you know, all the lyrics were very pertinent. And I really went into the zone. And then I was like, then I opened my eyes. I was like, oh wait, this is what I'm here to do. I'm here to make music. And when I, you know, over the last few months, I started saying, I'm a musician. I am a musician. And I started realizing, wait, I'm a musician. And when I was, you know, heavy into the psychedelics, I started having these visions of me on stage in front of 100,000 people. And I was channeling energy. And that's what I started doing, was channeling messages and energy. And, you know, at that point, when I saw myself in front of 100,000 people, I was like, okay, this is, when I realized I'd lost my mind, I kind of doubted that whole vision. And I was like, okay, cool. But over the last year or so, I realized, no, wait, that's actually what I get to do in this lifetime. And so in terms of that trauma, I now believe that what has happened to me is we have infinite potential within us. And I truly believe that vision of me on stage in front of 100,000 people, 100,000, but like a big crowd, we'll just keep the numbers loose.
No, we're going to put it out there, 100,000.
I put it out there a number of times, but you know, in kind of saying it, but you know, and I keep coming back to that. And piece by piece, then over the last year and a half, the most insane, call it coincidences, but like people I'm meeting, experiences are just putting me further along that path. And I'm just like, I now totally believe and understand that we have this thing inside of us, this dream that is so beyond everything that we've ever been told that we can do. I never thought I called myself a musician, and now I do. And I'm in that process of making it happen. And I believe it's like a gift that's been given to me. It's deep rooted in there, and it's happening. And every day that unfolds is just, it's leading me along this path of this direction of getting to this point. And I don't have an attachment or expectation of what that needs to look like, but it's like it's pulling me to that point. So yeah, the music came to me through Tom, basically. And then I spent the last year, get back to your point. So I started playing music on Instagram Live when COVID started, because, you know, everyone was trying to connect with each other. All my family and friends were back home, and I started doing 12 o'clock here and 8 p.m. there. I would play a live show on Instagram. Like, I'd sing a song every day. So that would be my like setup for the first couple of months of COVID. I was like doing a live thing, and I'd have, you know, 20 people.
Connection, that's it.
Yeah. And then in June, I hadn't figured out the money. My apartment in LA was ridiculously expensive. Everything in my soul was saying I can't go back to that corporate world. I was like, well, I got a Subaru, leased a new one, and gave away all my possessions, and gave up my apartment. Had no idea where I was going to go. One of my friends, she was going to Idaho for a week, decided, okay, well, I'll come meet you up there for a couple of days. I had no plans, and I had no idea where I'd go, but I went in the direction of Idaho, and actually met someone, and got in my car and I started driving, and spent kind of 3-4 months in around Wyoming, Idaho, Montana. I was all that world. Met one of my dear friends, Sandy, a couple of days in Idaho, into this journey where she had gone to school with my dearest friend, Kate, 20 years ago. And we met in the most random place, and then she was someone that I traveled with a lot of the summer, and had the biggest adventure. And
so it reminds me, I'm just, as you're talking, it reminds me a lot about, have you read the book The Celestine Prophecy? I'm sure you have, but
I actually haven't, but I want to.
It's phenomenal, but it reminded me a lot of that. It's about just trusting that you just take this step to go forward, and you're not quite sure where, sell everything, let everything go, and just trusting in your heart that something is going to unfold as a result of that. And then literally the coincidences and the people that you meet just lead you from one to the next, and it just flows so beautifully that eventually you end up exactly where you need to be, which is kind of what happened with you, because now fast forward 6 months, you're back in Venice where you started, but now you've had that. Tell us about where you're at now, because you've had that clarity of mind and that space to go back to where you were with your career, but in a different.
So I thought for the last 18 months I've been running away from all job, corporate. I was like, no, I can't do that. My soul is calling for life in a different way. And I experienced that. The last, I said, 9 months, I've done 30,000 miles on the road, done all the scary things, looked at all my emotions, all traumas, and just had, I can't condense it. It's just, had a good time, had a really good time. But about a month ago, I was with my friend Kate in Florida, and I was like, all right, I've done my 18 months. I've done my, so February last year, when I was at this critical point, I was turning 30. And that's when I basically made a commitment to myself, gifting my 30th year to myself to purely heal, to look at all this stuff in my head. And that's what I did. So, some of it was then spent in LA, and then most of it was then spent on the road. But I got to February of this year, made an album for myself, put it on YouTube, and kind of sung about all the songs that I've, done, written in the last year. And I was like, all right, well, I think it's time to actually do some good with it. I had to spend that period of time purely on myself, not listening to anyone else, just doing what felt good to me. And thank God for my parents not I actually started speaking to my mom, and she's my best friend, thankfully, and I speak to her every day. My dad definitely thinks I've lost my rocker, so hi Dad. Definitely not gonna share this with him, or maybe I will. And I'm grateful for their support, but it got to that point of, all right, time to do this. And I knew in my soul that, I kept having this vision of this music. I knew that, every experience had been I knew that I had a story to share. I knew that I was able to talk about processing feelings and emotions and feelings that people resonated with me with. I was doing tarot readings for people. I knew that I had a gift of being able to talk about the stuff that matters. And so I came back to LA, and, having built this community of I guess Silicon Peach startup investors thing, for those 3 years with Tom, we used to host gigs in his back garden, and people would come, and it was like we'd had 150 CEOs and investors, and everyone just loved it. Was just soul connection. And there was like a business aim because it was recruitment, but it was all about just connecting people. And me and Tom were the same person. We just connected people, loved interesting conversations. And essentially that's what I'm doing now. It's like I'm really good at bringing people together. I know that the music fits into this some way. I know that my interests and passions have just completely blown open. I know that the money and the visa and the place to live and the man and all the stuff that I want is going to fit into my life somehow. And so I've been back 2 weeks, and I met you, and I've had so many conversations of people that are just looking for more meaning in their lives. I feel like the entire world has been forced on this healing journey, whether they necessarily know it's a healing in those words, but it's definitely finding more meaning and purpose in their life. And I have been connected with so many people like yourself. And what I'm interested in is bringing this world into the masses. And I know that's what I get to do. I get to translate stuff. I mean, if you said God or divine to me 2 years ago, I'd be like, who is this loony? Right. Cool. Peace out. Yeah. But it's all about translating the tools, and you can talk about it in a therapeutic type way, but how I got myself out of my dark place. And I feel like the world more than ever is needing that. So I'm kind of piecing it all together right now as we speak.
And that's so beautiful for people to hear, because I think, you know, you've literally gone full circle when you look at where you were with the skills and your education and everything you were doing in the corporate world back in the UK, to come here to rebuild a life, to go through that tragedy and that trauma, to then lose yourself for 9, 12, 18 months and then come back round to where you were, but having a completely different perspective as to how that now is going to transform your life, but other people's lives around you, and to be able to use everything that you've learned from experience through business to actually now engaging in helping other people, to connecting other people, to build this community where people can start to heal themselves, each other, and the world at large. It's just so beautiful, and I commend you.
I feel, I mean, my root of it is really, you know, of course it all comes back to Tom. The pain in the ass will never it's a funny thing when you think about, oh, have I done that Tom period? No. Oh wait, he's always around. But you know, in terms of I recognize that some of the stuff, especially with energetic channeling and talking about divine experiences and stuff that you can't really explain, I'm fully aware that I sound batshit crazy to a lot of people. I'm fully aware of that. But it's now, I recognize that where Tom was, he didn't have any reference. We were going through the same thing. We were waking up to our purpose, to our being bigger than everything that we'd known. We were waking up. And, you know, if I can share that there is something else out there in a way to anyone, to people realizing that, you know, there might be something beyond what they've known. And actually not only just like not only that there is someone else maybe who's experiencing it, but there's actually tools that can get you out of whatever suffering it is. I mean, everyone that I know, especially in London and wherever, is suffering with depression or anxiety or panic attacks or stuckness in some way. And it's just like, cool, I know all the stuff that can help. Let's talk about it. Let's actually talk about it like it's normal. And I think that's kind of, so it's kind of more normalizing what this waking up, healing journey and the power of it. And it isn't just some woo-woo thing, but it is actually, that's what we came onto this planet to do.
And I couldn't agree with you more. And listen, give me batshit crazy any day of the week over anxiety and depression and angst and stuckness. And, you know, people used to say to me when I first started on my healing journey, you've been living in LA too long. You've been in Venice. You need to come back to London and just get normal again. And I'm like, no, you don't understand.
You think that's fun? Normal. You think you're having a great time in London? Oh God.
Exactly. So that's it. It's just, people are becoming more aware because people realize that the old system is broken. It doesn't work. You know, like I said at the very beginning when I launched the show, it's like people are searching for something greater than what has been because it is not enough anymore. And people realize that, you know what, the woo-woo and the crazy and the out there is sometimes perhaps the way that we have to move forward if you're ready to make that change. If you're not ready, then great. You know, you're going to stay where you are in that egoic space of, you know, societal values and norms. But if you're really ready to heal and to change your life and to move forward into, you know, much healthier, stable, I think, way
empowered. This is like 100%. I used to think, and I know, so people think just life is happening to them and they can't change anything. And I was in that, especially that's one of the reasons I quit my job in London. I was just like, I was single, I wasn't happy in my job, like I just wasn't happy in life. So the only thing I had any control over was quitting my job, which I did. But realizing now that I am the creator of everything in my life. And you have to go through a period of understanding yourself and unpacking all that stuff to then there's definitely some weird stuff we could talk about, but literally creating everything that you want in your life, whether it is relationship, job, dream, like I'm creating that role of, you know, being a musician. I am a musician and I get to create that. And I know that all the logistics I have the energetic understanding now that there's science behind it, and it's stuff that I've never been taught. Well, actually, there's a guy that I'm going to introduce you to who's awesome. who does. He has like a system which he can like talk about it in a mass way. But it's like, why would you not want to do this? And so, like, I know that I get to talk about it. I'm covered in tattoos. I get to be a musician. I get to do it from like a rock star perspective.
I love
I'm
it.
claiming that.
And you are doing you and being you, and that's what's so beautiful about it. And you know what, the right people will find you and gravitate towards you, and if they don't, then they're not your people. And I think that's the other thing is to remember, because we're so wrapped up in, oh well, if so and so doesn't approve, and what if they say this, or what if they say that, you know what, screw it, doesn't matter, because it's about you being authentic, being genuine, showing up as yourselves, and helping other people to the best of your ability by all of the things, the experiences, the tools, the techniques that you have learned for yourself, that you can then go on to share with other people and help change somebody else's life by being you.
And I think it's also, I am batshit crazy. I have like experienced more wild, I can't even like, I mean, I'd love to like have a session with you, talk about life and stuff. But you know, I now understand the power of just being me, and what that does is gives other people, everyone's crazy, everyone has this insane thing in them which everyone's too afraid to talk about, and like, oh, if I say this thing out loud, everyone will think I'm crazy and therefore be judged. But everyone has this dream inside them which is so repressed from, I can't do that, I can't be that, because what people think. But I understand that my role, and I feel so grateful for this, is that the more out there I am, it gives other people permission to be out there too. And it's like, that's all it is. It's just permission for other people to be like, oh,
exactly.
I won't go as crazy as she did, but I think I could go half crazy.
Beautiful. And I love that, because that's how it's supposed to be. You know, we've been so conditioned for so long about this is how I need to act, be, say, do, but it's not. It's about self-expression, about going within, finding yourself, being yourself, so that you can live the life that you would deserve to live. It's our birthright at the end of the day to be you and to live your life and to do what fills you up on a soul level. And I just have to commend you, honestly, Holly, just sharing your story, sharing your journey, going through what you went through, from those deep depths of tragedy and despair to being so fully in your own space and so in alignment with yourself and your mission. And it's just so empowering for so many people. And I'm thrilled that you were here to share this with us today, because I know that somebody somewhere listening to this is going to get something from what you have just shared so openly.
I hope so. And, you know, I believe in we always hear what we're supposed to hear in any conversation, in any interaction, any day, and it finds us. There is divine intelligence working out, and it's happening. The world's waking up to this stuff, and
it really is.
I'm stoked about what you're doing, and this is what really excites me, is that there's so many powerful, you know, what works for one person is there's a different tool in for a different person, and it's all talk about the same thing, but there's different ways you can come into this world. So I think it's incredible to whatever avenue share this. So
well, I'm thrilled. I can't wait to see what happens next, because I can just feel it in my bones. It's going to be amazing, and I'm going to be there watching you, and I'll be one of the 100,000 people, and you're on stage.
You'll be backstage, don't worry, we got you.
But in the meanwhile, we'll put all of your links, all your YouTube, everything else up into the show notes, and you can share that song, and we can all listen to that too. And listen, we'll have you back. Come have a session. I would love for you to experience that too, because it's going to be amazing. And we'll just watch this space, because you know, as and when everything grows and evolves into the next level of what you're creating, we'll do it again, we'll share again, and we'll just keep going.
Cool. Well, thank you for having me. It's been awesome.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us. All right, take care, darling. See you. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me today. I truly hope that you enjoyed the show.